Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost. It's Friday, and it's the True Community Gathering. This is Theater Resources Unlimited. We're an arts services organization based in New York that used to be pretty New York centric. Then something happened called COVID 2.5 years ago, and the only way I could actually run my programs was by actually finding out how to use Zoom. Hello, here we are on Zoom, and it had a nice little side effect. Suddenly all of our programming was being seen and participated in with people from all over the globe. So today we have somebody in from Scotland. We normally have people from Australia, from UK, Malaysia, Singapore, and all over the country. So Zoom has been a great boon for us because we've been able to open up our programming and open up our community to people outside of New York. I'm very happy to have all of you with us. Thank you for joining us out there in either YouTube or podcast land. We started this community gathering thing because, like I said, we weren't able to do our programs live, and so I had to do something and figure out something other than close my company. I had to find something to do. So we opened up the room, and lo and behold, 30 to 60, sometimes as many as 90 people show up in our room every Friday at 5 o'clock. We open at 5. We start our conversation with our guests at 5:30. If you'd like to be part of the room, and if you'd like to be able to be here and meet people live on Zoom, and maybe even ask questions and be part of the conversation, email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com, and we'll happily put you on the Zoom list and invite you every week to be with us. Conversations have been about a lot of, well, this is the 138th consecutive one. So how have I come up with 138 different things to talk about every week since April 17th, 2020? I don't know. But anyway, in any case, we've managed to find people who are interesting and have interesting things to say. Most of it has been theater oriented. A lot of it for a while was about creating and Shutdown, and now a lot of what we're talking about is about moving into live performance and overcoming some of the challenges of doing that. But we also like to welcome and engage people in conversations about other media other than theater. And we have friends who work in both theater and in film and TV. And one of them is a dear friend, Daryl Sledge, who has been back in touch with us lately. And I knew him originally as a theater producer, but he's very much involved in film. And he wanted me to meet a couple of friends of his who he thinks are really smart. Will have some really interesting things to say about film and television. I think it's a useful conversation for my community, because a lot of us do dabble with the idea of expanding beyond theater, and it's really good to know as much as we possibly can about the other art forms that are out there and available for us to be a part of. I'm going to ask some interesting questions, I hope, to my two guests, and we're going to have a conversation about the differences between theater and film and TV, and also specifically what this is called today is how has Shutdown changed the theater and TV, the TV and film industry. Curious to see what my guests have to say about that. I'm going to bring them in. One of them is on screen. It's going to be Louis Guerra, and the other one is is in transit right now, and he's going to be talking to us on his cell phone. So Louis, is it how do you pronounce your last name for me so I get it right?
Yeah, it's Louis Guerra.
Guerra. I didn't put the "gu" in there, so it's Guerra.
Yeah.
Hi, Louis Guerra. Welcome to True. And Jim Bigwood, can you say hello to us so everybody can establish the fact that you're part of the conversation? Jim? Oh, okay, Louis. It's just you and me. We lost Jim.
Jim probably always needs a moment to take the phone away from his ear and unmute. And I know he's got 20 people around him probably
okay.
But I'm happy to fill in the gaps.
Well, let's start with you.
Here I am. Sorry about that.
Okay, for those of you out there in YouTube land who are doubting me, he really is here with us. So this is the voice of Jim Bigwood. and the face of Luis Guerra.
There you go.
It's a new vaudeville act. Luis, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, I'll start by saying thank you for having me on. Thank you to Daryl Sledge, who's a dear friend of mine who I've worked with and asked me to be a part of this. Like your audience to know, I have a huge love of the theater, and I wish I was as smart as all of you when it comes to the theater, but my background is more in film and television. I make a living as an assistant director, first assistant director to be specific.
That's part of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what the different words mean.
Okay. So I can tell you a first assistant director is the guy or the woman that schedules the show, that puts the show, whether it's a film or a TV show, together in the most efficient order for shooting while respecting the director's vision, but while also making sure, making sure we stay on budget and in a timely fashion. I'm the guy that runs the set and keeps things running in orderly fashion, and I serve as a liaison between the producers and the director and the crew and the cast.
Okay, but Jim, for a second, could you mute yourself because you're pulling the camera away from Luis while he's talking?
Sure, I can mute myself.
Okay, then we'll bring you on in a second. Okay, Luis, back to you.
Yeah, so the AD is the guy that kind of has to put the whole show together in an efficient order in terms of schedule. A lot of what we do is put the schedule together, and we are in charge of telling the actors when they work, the production designer when sets need to be built by. So we're also working with them to make sure we're not scheduling something unrealistic. But we want to enforce the director's vision and try to execute what it is he or she wants to shoot, but do it in the most economical and sensible way. So it's a very collaborative process, which I enjoy. So
I think that most of us are a little bit naive about the different aspects of the different jobs in film. Could you actually give us a little bit of a rundown of who does what? Start at the top of the pyramid and let's work down.
Sure. Well, in general, and Jim is going to be better at this than I am, I think, because he is a producer. But in general, the producer or the line producer, when you're actually on the set, would be at the top of the pyramid. Above him might be someone called the showrunner, which is a head writer. Let's say you're doing a show, a TV show, an episodic. The head writer is not always present, but he or she is actually the big boss. We're all trying to serve the script that's written. On the set proper where we're filming, you would have the line producer that makes sure everything is getting shot that's scheduled to be shot for that day, and that it's getting done on time and on budget. Next to the line producer would be the director. Often the director is brought in just for that episode, so they're a guest director. There's also someone known as the producing director that's part of the show. So right now I'm working on Law and Order, well-known staple show of New York that was off the air for 10 years. Now it's back. I'm one of the first assistant directors on it. I joined last year when it got rebooted, and I was lucky enough that they asked me back for another season. So here I am in the middle of prepping for an episode, and we have a guest director, but my last episode was directed by the producing director. So the hierarchy would be, the producing director and the line producer collaborate together. They work together all the time. One is helping the director enforce the vision. The other one is making sure we're doing it in the most economical way. Under them, there are all of the department heads of the various departments. You have your director of photography, who's responsible for the look of the show and the style in which the show is shot. That's the DP. You have your costume designer, who's responsible, of course, for the costumes, the clothing, the look. And this is all in collaboration, of course, with the director and making sure everything's, if you have a guest director, you have to tell them what the look of the show is, how it's been established. Do we shoot it handheld camera, steady cam, or are we more traditional with cameras on dollies? And you want to make sure you keep that going through the series.
Well, let me ask you this, because a lot of us have gone through in the 2.5 years. We had to adjust from being in a live medium to being in a film medium, because we had to learn how to work on Zoom, which is it's a film medium ultimately. So one of the things that we learned, the director of photography, the thing that was new to me and to a lot of us was having to set up shots, having to actually frame things. So that's also part of what a director of photography does, or no? Is that only in Zoom?
No. That's absolutely correct. The DP will help frame the shots along with the director, sometimes along with the AD, quite frankly. Sometimes we're setting up shots to encompass things that tell the whole story. A big part of what I do in episodic is I really need to know the script inside and out. And sometimes I will know the script because I'm prepping it for 8 to 9 days before we shoot it more thoroughly than the director of photography, because they're always shooting. They're going episode to episode to episode. I'm shooting, then prepping with the director, going on a tech scout like Jim is on right now, surveying all the locations, then getting ready to shoot again. So sometimes we might be shooting a scene, composing a shot with the DP, and I've got to remind her or him, hey, we have to make sure that person in the background is in the shot because they're essential to the story, things like that.
Yeah, those are the new ways of thinking that we have to develop as theater people. We have to, so it's a different way of thinking of things.
Right.
At least it is for me. Jim, you can turn on your mic and introduce yourself now. Let's hear a little bit of a background about you. And I know you said that we'll be able to see you on camera a little later. I know that you're in transit right now. Let's see.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Great. Okay. My name's Jim Bigwood. I'm a line producer, which is one of the categories that Lewis just listed. And I started in the business in 1983 as an assistant production accountant on one of the most notorious shows or movies in the history of New York filming, Coppola's Cotton Club, which was a show that was budgeted at $15 million and ended up costing over $50 billion. So in the accounting department,
Jim, on the other hand, it wasn't Heaven's Gate.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't that, although it was probably as much of a bomb. Unfortunately, I think it was a good movie, but it wasn't successful. But it was a baptism by fire, and in the accounting department, you see all the things that can go wrong, and I got out of the accounting department as soon as I possibly could, and moved into originally associate producing, then line producing. I then along the way became a member of the Directors Guild and a production manager, which is a position that's covered by the DGA, the Directors Guild of America.
Well, let me ask you both this. What were your goals originally? Did you know where you were going, and what was, you just basically told us your trajectory, Jim, which is interesting. You were saying you went from this job to this job to this job. Was it all planned did you have it planned because you were trying to reach a final goal, a job that you had in your sights?
I originally went to New York to be an actor, and quickly discovered that all the old men parts that I played in college were being played by real old men. And so I wasn't going to be hireable as an actor until I hit middle age or later. So I had always been interested in movies. I made little 8mm, super 8mm movies when I was a kid. And my degree at the University of Wisconsin was in radio, television, and film. Although the University of Wisconsin was not and is not known as a production university. It's more film history and film criticism is their specialty. So I didn't learn a lot in film production at university. But when I came out after trying to be an actor, I sort of realized that wasn't going to work. And so I decided to try to find my way into the industry, and production accounting, paradoxically, is a very, very good way to get into the movie business because A, nobody wants to do it, and B, nobody thinks of it as a way to get into something as supposedly glamorous as the movie business, and C, it's a peculiar talent. There are brilliant geniuses who cannot balance a checkbook. But if you happen to have that particular skill, you have a way of getting into the industry.
Well,
So
also,
it
I
was,
mean, the comparison that I'm thinking of is basically for us, it's company managers or general managers, or we also have accountants, of course, but it's the fact that you were in a job where you're actually learning what things actually cost.
what
Was that the
what
value of
things
it for you?
cost and how what things cost and how things are supposed to be done. You learn a lot because in production accounting, it as you say, it's the general manager. It's very much nuts and bolts, and you interact with all the departments one way or another. You pay everybody's check. You really learn very quickly all the aspects of production. There's a paradox in that the job that Lewis does and the job that I do now, he's a first assistant director. I'm a production manager in the same union, but or guild. It's really not a union; it's a guild. But it's his skills and my skills are very different. We sort of complement each other. I mean, and Lewis may disagree or may want to weigh in on that, but there is often a progression from first assistant director to production manager, which has always seemed a little strange to me because the talents of a production manager are not somebody who comes up as I did through production accounting. I learned a lot about everything in production, but the one thing that I did not learn, it's my weakest area, is the set. And the set is the bailiwick of the first AD. And although it's a collaborative position and we sometimes collaborate on production schedules and ways of figuring out how to accommodate some strange actors' requests or their availability or the availability of a location. And I may often collaborate with the first AD on things like that. The fact is that I could no more go and first AD a set. And I don't want to say then that Lewis could come and be a UPM, because there are first ADs who make very good for UPMs. But to me, it doesn't seem a natural progression. A more logical progression, and this happens quite often as well, first ADs become directors or are given the opportunity to direct, often on a TV series. If you've had 4 or 5 years of the series, the first AD knows the show about as well as anybody, and they get an opportunity to direct. That's the more logical
Lewis,
progression.
So Lewis, is that the direction that you see your career going?
Well, I have to first, I have to say, I agree with Jim. That is the direction it will go if I let it. I could have been a UPM years ago. My quote unquote book is in with our guild, the Directors Guild of America, to be a UPM. I did the job once, and I don't ever want to do it again. He's absolutely right. It's a different skill set. I'm a director at heart. I'm a storyteller, and I, like I said before, I enjoy composing the shots. I enjoy telling the story in a creative way, but having the challenge of having to do it in the time frame given and with the resources that we have to do it with. I've always wanted to be a director. You asked our trajectory. I didn't know anyone in the business. I would, like I think Jim wanted to, get in however I could. And so there was an internship. I took it. I was in college, having no idea what it was. It was in the location department, which is another department I didn't touch on. And through that department, I met someone called the assistant directors, and I became an additional helper on days when they needed additional production assistants. Those are additional helpers hired now and then to go get coffee for actors or coffee for crew or show people where the bathroom is. But generally we do what are called lockups, and that's crowd control. And you do enough of that, you get more and more responsibility. And then you turn in your book and you become a second assistant director, which is what I did. It took about 6 years of doing that. And then you move up to first assistant director. And hopefully, as Jim said, one day I'll get the shot to direct what I call, in the big leagues. I still direct short films. I did one 2 years ago. You put it out in the film festival, and that's following your passion. But no, I don't think I don't think I could be a unit production manager and don't really have a desire to produce, as many do.
And did you know that you were actually answering one of the questions that was in the chat? Did you
I
realize
did
that?
not.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't know. I didn't look at the chat.
Judy was asking, how did Lewis get into the DGA? And
Oh.
you basically told us.
That's how you do it. There are several ways in the guild, and one of them is to earn 600 days as a production assistant, or a fewer amount of days as a directors guild trainee. I think it's 250, and then you can apply to be in the guild, and then you submit the book with proof of the work you did on these legitimate shows by showing your paycheck and your production report and the crew list with your name on it. And then you get in, and then you say, okay, now, and that doesn't mean you get work, you still have to find it. But then you say, okay, the next time you get hired, you can get hired as a second assistant director. And there are two categories of seconds. There's a second and a second. There are different pay scales. And then you can join the guild once you get that first job.
Actually, I realized that it's not in the chat because she didn't realize she was direct messaging me. So Judith, your question didn't actually get seen by anyone but me, but lucky me. So before I move on to some other things, I just want to ask the room whether there are any other definitions that they'd like, if they want to understand any other job descriptions. I think we have a lot of writers in the room, and I've always thought about writing for film or TV, and I always stop myself. I'm terrified of it. I guess the one thing that's, I guess, obvious is that film and TV depend on so many nuances of visual. I mean, it's all about the visual. It's all about thinking in frame, and basically who's in the frame, what's happening in the frame. And I'm a dialogue guy. Do either of you have any thoughts or advice to theater writers who are thinking about writing for film or TV? Any how-tos?
Well, I'm not a writer. It's not my talent. But what I can do is read a script, and this is no great work of genius on my part. Other people have said it before me. But a basic rule of writing for television or film is don't tell me, show me.
Which basically is so different from theater, because theater is very much a language medium. It's so much of it is about the language. There are instances of theater where it does become very visual and very dependent on the visual, but you don't have the advantage of a camera on stage. You can't tell the audience to an extent. A director can help that, but you can't tell the audience what to look at on stage. In a film, you're telling them this is what's important right now. This is what matters. This, whatever they're saying, what you're seeing is what's happening.
Yeah, I'm looking at your room. I would just add to what Jim just said. You know, if you want to write for TV, I know this firsthand from my own scripts that have been rejected, is you've got to grab the person reading it in the first 2 to 3 pages. Otherwise, they put it down. There's not a lot of room for exposition when you have 44, 48, 52 pages maximum to write, because that's how long an episodic is, depending these days if it's streaming or if it's network and there's commercials and all that. But you've got to grab them or they put it down, because there are so many people that want to do it, and there are so many scripts that come across their desk. But if you do grab them in the first 2, 3, 4 pages, they keep reading. They say, oh, wow, this is damn good. Now they think, can I develop this?
Tracy Swedlow suggests that you go over the responsibilities of the showrunner again, or in a little bit more specific detail, because it is, as she says, this is an important position that is having a huge impact on the culture.
Okay.
Jim, do you want to take that? Because you both would have different perspectives on the showrunner, I would think.
Well, yeah, and there are a lot of different kinds of showrunners too. There is a long time rivalry is perhaps not the right word, but I'll use it, between the Directors Guild of America and the Writers Guild of America. And in feature films, there has been a tradition of it's a director's medium. There's the whole auteur theory of that, says that that a film is really the work of one person, the director. And that is the way that the feature film industry evolved. In series television, and this would be slightly different if you're talking about feature-length movies for television, but in series television, the evolution went very differently for two reasons. One, because the Writers Guild was trying to get some of the power back, and they weren't having much luck with it in feature films, but also because, and Lewis touched upon this a little bit, they are the constant. If you're writing for series television, if you're working on a television series, the person who is there from the beginning is the writer. And sometimes if you're Aaron Sorkin or you're somebody like that, you're a writer-director, but normally you have a different director each week or each episode coming in, taking on the show for 8 days and then leaving and not even staying through post-production. They get 4 days to deliver their director's cut, and then it's taken away from them, and it goes, post-production continues on without them. So the position of a showrunner becomes much more important in series television because often, but not always, they created the show. But again, they are there from the beginning to the end. They're the ones who set the tone and the look of the show. And the directors for hire who come in are simply told in what's called the tone meeting by the showrunner, this is the show that you're making. This is how we do it. This is what we want to have done, and then that's what they are told to do. So it is actually not as big a position as it is in feature films. And so the showrunner has sort of taken on some of the aspects of the auteur theory in television series.
To go back to something very basic, which we should at least touch on, the relationship between a writer and the production is different in theater versus film or TV. Writer in theater maintains the copyright and maintains a certain amount of theoretical control over his work. TV and film are directors' mediums, we're told, and scripts are bought, and very more often than not, the writer has little control over what happens after his script is bought. Can you address some of that? Tell us a little bit about the realities of that. Clean up anything wrong that I said.
Me again or Lewis?
I'm waiting. I'm on tenterhooks to see who's going to answer it.
Well, go ahead, Jim. You answer that, and I'll add on.
No. You. Well, because lately I've been mostly involved in series television as opposed to feature length, whether it be for big screen or for small screen. I've been on productions that are under the control of the showrunner, of the writer. To the extent that anything on television is under the control of the people that actually make it. It's the people who give you the money to make it who ultimately have to be satisfied with what you do. Again, I'm talking about series that are, I'm not, I don't make The Sopranos, I don't make 6 Feet Under. I make shows that are entertaining, but they're not works of art. I don't pretend that they are. And I think if you actually got your writers to be maybe a couple of drinks in them, they would probably admit that they're not works of art either. And so there are shows that, because of their brilliance, have a power that extends past the fact that ABC or an HBO or whoever was willing to put the money up to do it. And in those situations, the creative aspects of the production take on a stronger, they have more strength. But on the kind of shows that I work on, I'm just hired to work on them. I have no input into them creatively. I'm hired after what you just described has already taken place. The script or the concept, the idea has been bought, and it's now time to make it. And so that's when I get hired. So I don't have a lot of input or really knowledge of how you get a script to the point where you hire somebody like me to get it made.
Let me deal with a couple questions before I switch the topic a little bit. Where is it? Helen Noakes wants to know, is it necessary for writers to submit scripts through agents, or is there a way to submit scripts directly to producers? Actually, here we're back at the language, the vocabulary thing again. Who do you submit a script to? I think is the question. And does it require agents? How does a writer get a foothold in the business?
Right.
That should be for you, Louis, because you're the writer side
Yeah.
of it.
I mean, look, I would say productions that are, production on shows you've heard on, I'm not going to say the others are not legitimate, but productions that are being made that are on TV now, that are on streaming services, they're made by companies who have union agreements, and they're made, and as such, they are only going to be looking at scripts that are solicited, and the solicitation of scripts come through agents. So the short answer is you have to have an agent, or you have to have a literary agent or a manager that knows people, so that when these showrunners want to hire a writer's room, there's usually 5 writers or 4 writers to a show. My show, I think, has 4 right now, plus the showrunner. So there are 5 on Law and Order, and they take turns writing the different episodes. They got their jobs by showing writing samples. Some are more established. One of the writers right now is brand new. She showed writer samples. She might have written something for another show that they liked, similar to our show. So they took her over to our show. But it starts with getting representation, having an agent believe in you, and then saying, I want to represent you, because why? They'll make money off of you if they can represent you and you get hired in a writer's room. They're getting their cut, as it were. Does it mean you can't get something made if you're a writer and you don't have an agent? No, you could certainly do something independently. You can write the best script, ever, and you can have an independent director or director that sees it, that loves it, and you raise the funds, and then you become represented after the fact. Harder to do, but certainly possible.
Okay, well, I don't see other questions. And by the way, everybody, don't send questions directly to me. Put them in the chat, because Owen is the person who's supposed to be looking for them, and I'm getting all these questions directed to me.
But Bob, if you like, I just want to touch a little bit, because you said there are so many writers in the room, just on the relationship that what I do, an AD and a director, have with the writer on television. I would say right now, my experience, 50-60% of the time, the writer is not even there. They're often in Hollywood, in California. They're not present on the set when we're actually shooting. The other 40%, they are. Sometimes they come for 2 days and they leave. Then maybe a different writer might come for the next 2 days just to be available to the director. And they do that because it is a collaborative medium. I always appreciate the writer there, but I can tell you that as an assistant director, I will reach out to the writer directly, with the line producer's knowledge. They say, go for it. When we have a script that I call unproducible. What does unproducible means? It means that the writing is so ambitious, which is wonderful. You always want to write from your heart first. I think as an aspiring writer, I do the same, but then it can't be produced in 8 days. It can't be done because there's so much work. So it has to be consolidated. And then when you get into the logistics, the nitty gritty of what I do, which is scheduling the show, you realize you're in one location and you usually have a shoot day of 12 hours. You've got to take the scenes that fit into those 12 hours to also make sure it fits into what is day and what is night, what is interior, what is exterior, what are the time constraints of each scene. And if it doesn't work, then you look as an AD with the director for creative ways to solve it. And I say, okay, well, I bet if this scene that's night can play in the daytime as a walk and talk rather than in the restaurant, we can shoot it, because the restaurant the director wants will not let us have the restaurant at night. They open for business in real life, and we have to shoot that restaurant. It's the only one because it's right next to the apartment that the director wants to shoot these other scenes, and we don't have time to move all the trucks. You know, there's a lot of logistics involved in what we do. We've got to shoot the apartment scene in the day, then we've got to go to the restaurant, but there's still enough daylight. And if we can get that restaurant scene done before they open at 5 p.m., we're allowed to use that restaurant. So then we go to the writer and say, can this become a day scene? And here's how it could work. And then they look at the script. And so there's a lot of that back and forth. Well, yes, it could, but the information here has to play a day earlier. So there's a lot of that happens in prep. And I just wanted to touch on that.
Interesting, very interesting. We do have a couple questions, although I do wanted to switch to a different topic, but let me do these first. Eric Jones wants to know what you think about film festivals who have screenwriter contests. Does that ever open up a door for an agent?
I mean, personally, I would say yes. I directed a short film, which I co-wrote in 2019, and I went on Film Freeway, and I entered it in probably 65 competitions, you know, and won a lot of awards. Very happy. It didn't get me a director's card or anything like that, but it did get me, it got me what I wanted. They got me a short story that I told. I got it seen. It's on my website. That was really cool. And I think the same thing would be true for screenwriter contests as well. If you know which ones to you know, you get enough, you might.
I think that's probably the better question, is which are the ones that have the most credibility, because I'm sure that there's a lot of them that they can do different things for you. You have to know the territory.
You definitely have to know the territory. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head because it's been a while, but you know, I actually hired a producer writer to help me with my script, who I paid a fee to, who I thought I wrote the most beautiful pilot, and he tore it to shreds, said this is trash. And over the course of 2 years, we made it better and better and better. Yeah. And the rewriting, it was, oh my God, I learned a whole lot about rewriting and paring down. And you've got too many characters. You got to pick one character. He made me watch the pilot of Friends. He said the pilot of Friends was not about 6 people. It was about Jennifer Aniston left on the altar, you know, and then I had to watch you know, and I watched other shows. That's what I'm trying to do. You know, the pilot of Lost, he made me, you know, seeing how this, my pilot's an ensemble. I had to learn to center it on one character, even though it was an ensemble. But anyway, to answer your question, yes, there are specific legitimate screenwriting competitions. I just don't know them off the top of my head. And there are those that will call themselves legitimate, and they're not scams, but they won't do anything for your career. You know, they'll judge your scripts, and that'll be it.
Well, I've seen, maybe we'll come back to this, but I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time without asking you what I wanted to ask. One of the things I wanted to ask, I want to talk about Shutdown. I want to talk about March of 2020. I want to ask you how that affected you, your career, and the industry you're in. A tiny little question with hardly anything to talk about here. My general naive take on it is that we all moved into film during Shutdown, but the way that you produced things, so the way that you made films happen, were very different. Those of us here in the room, found a lifeline with Zoom, with virtual production. Did you get involved in any virtual production, or what happened? What happened to your business? What happened to your career? It's a long question.
You want to go, Jim?
Well, I'm 68. I've been trying to retire for a number of years, and
know the feeling.
When COVID hit, I just finished a show. We finished shooting in December, and COVID hit the following February. The show finished in post-production under COVID restrictions, but we didn't shoot under any kind of restrictions. And I deliberately, because of the position that I'm in, I deliberately chose not to work. And fortunately, I was in a position where I could choose something like that. But because as the producer of a show, I'm responsible for hiring the entire crew. I don't cast it, but I'm involved in dealing with what kind of offers are made to actors to get them to become part of the cast. And I didn't want to be in that position of responsibility. Because at that time, it was like if you did anything, somebody was going to get sick and somebody was going to die. And I did not want to be in a position to be the cause of somebody dying. So I simply stopped. And what ultimately happened was I did 2 shows in a row that the original producer, in one case, was fired, in the other case, quit. And I was begged by people that I had worked with previously to help them out, come in and help them make it through the rest of the season. And at that point, the vaccine had come along. I'd gotten myself vaccinated. There were the death sentence wasn't quite as drastic as it had been, and so I agreed to come back. But on both of the shows, the first season of the show I'm doing, the second season of now, and in the Netflix show that I did before that, on both shows we had COVID shutdowns because somebody got COVID and we ran out of material that we could shoot. Because in one case it was one of our leads. We shot as much as we could with the rest of the cast or with the people that hadn't been so close that they had to go into quarantine. And we actually had to shut down for a number of days until the person who had COVID didn't test negative and it didn't test positive anymore. And we were able to start back up again. So it wasn't a pleasant experience. And now, as the protocols have eased and it's become more of a something that we all live with on a day-to-day basis, and people are getting the vaccination, although unfortunately there are still people who simply on general principle won't do that.
It's a lot of them. A lot of them.
Which is unfortunate and sad. But it's become, like diabetes. It's something that you just you keep under control, but you're never really free of it.
How about you, Louis? How did it affect your work life? Did you retire? Did you decide to retire?
No, I have 2 kids and I didn't have that luxury, 2 teenagers, but I can tell you I was in the middle of the Las Vegas desert. I was on a show called The Stand for CBS, or the streaming service, CBS streaming service. And we were shooting, this was a Friday night, and we were due to start shooting on a Sunday. It was a little 4-day shoot. This whole movie, the whole show shot in Canada. We're coming in for 4 days. And it was a visual effects unit. And I got a call. I went out for breakfast Saturday morning. The director called me, goes, "Can you come in right away?" And Saturday was our day off. And I said, "Uh-oh." And he goes, "We're shutting down, or at least we're discussing it." So I came in, and an hour later, they got on the phone, CBS, we shut down. I was on a flight home the next morning. And because I was already on that show, I'm told, I don't have any facts, the CBS All Access show, The Stand, was the first show back in production in the United States, and that was the following August. So from March to August, I was out of work. That Monday, I was running from room to room, making sure my kids were on their Zooms for a classroom because all schools have been shut down. Jim mentioned our guild before, Directors Guild of America, that I'm part of. I'm also on the national board of that. I'm an associate member of the national board, and in being an associate member, I'm on the safety committee. There are a couple of different committees. So I was able to liaison as part of the safety committee with another committee called the Return to Work Committee, which was formed with the Directors Guild and the other working unions to get us all back to work. I was not on that committee, but I know some of the ADs and production managers that were, and they asked my input. So yes, I was very effective when we went back to work. There were all new protocols that came in. We have to, when we came back, we had to test for COVID. I believe it was every single day at first. You tested every day, and then it went to 3 days a week. It's never gone less than 3 days a week. I had to wear a face mask and shields for the first probably 6 months of COVID. I did a show in Chicago last summer in 21 with all the leads were 4 teenagers, and we had to keep them safe. So, and because I'm one of the key players, the director, the DP, myself, the camera operators that come so close to the actors, we need to make sure that they being on camera, not ever wearing masks because they're acting, are as safe as possible. So I'm always wearing a mask. I always had the shield on. Now it's a little more lax, but I have to tell you, Bob, we relaxed our restraints, I think in October, November. The return to work agreement is based on the number of hospitalizations in your area, our area being New York. They've gone up. As a result, our restraints have gotten stricter again. Not everyone takes it seriously. And it has been a problem. As an AD, you want to enforce things on the set. You want to be part of us is in liaison with some other people, be responsible for set safety. I'm pretty vocal about it. Let's all be smart. Let's keep working. Let's wear our mask. You don't always have, you're dealing with, you're on a human level. Not everyone wants to cooperate. People have different beliefs, and you go about it the best you can. Keep people as safe as you can, as often as you can.
Well, clearly it cost a lot of money for a lot of people. It increased the expenses of whatever you were working on that had to stop and then restart. Judy is mentioning the fact that we have understudies in theater. You can't do that. You can't have an understudy in film. So even though it was an expensive jump for producers in commercial theater to have additional understudies and standbys, and it did cost money, but that wasn't an option for film. A couple things that occur to me. It seems like audience behavior, the audiences have changed because of 2.5 years in shutdown. Do you think that that's true? Do you want to talk about what has changed in terms of that? We couldn't go out, so I think a lot of people became much more used. Let's also say that streaming is different from the streaming business is a little different from the TV business, isn't it? Or do you work in both?
The show I'm working on now is a streaming show for BET Plus, which is not one of the big streaming services, but it is a streaming service. And the real difference, it isn't much difference in terms of how we shoot it. The difference is when you're doing a television series for a network, you have to edit to time. You have to deliver 42 minutes for a 1-hour show to allow for the commercials. And you have act breaks and commercial breaks and things like that. And when you're doing a streaming show, and it's not limited to streaming, you go into the cable shows, for example. I mentioned Sopranos earlier. HBO was an early creator of great television. When they made an episode, it could be 55 minutes long, or it could be 47 minutes long. It was as long as it needed to be to tell the story. And that's a luxury in creative, from a creative point of view. But from my point of view as a producer who has to get things made and delivered on time and on budget, it has caused the process to become less efficient. And it's possible that it's for the best, but the problem is that the people that fund the shows are still trying to make Gone with the Wind with a budget that simply can't sustain it. And when you're at least forced to make it 42 minutes long, you can go to the writers and say, hey, you've just given me a 57-page script. You're going to end up cutting 15 minutes out of this script when you're in post because you have to deliver 42 minutes. And so you should do the cutting now so we don't waste time and money shooting material that we all know is going to be cut, and spend the money and the time that we have to make it well. Is what will happen is a script that's overwritten will when you cut it to 42, which you have to do, it will be things that are important to telling the story will end up being cut. It will make your final show choppy. It'll make it sometimes hard to follow because important information had to be cut for time. And if that is done originally by the writers thinking about it and, you know, cutting your script down from 57 pages to, doesn't have to be 42, it could be 47, you cut 10 pages out and it'll make a better show. So that is a downside of the streaming and what has become a new way of making entertainment. But I would say, and I'll shut up and give it back to Louis in a second. One other thing that is part of this that happened almost simultaneously is the fact that 75-inch television screens are now really not expensive anymore, and that the home viewing experience has become a lot more like going to the movies. And if we were still looking at 25-inch cathode ray tube televisions, I think that COVID wouldn't have changed things as much as it did. But because we can watch movies in really really good high definition in our houses, it's made it easier for people to adapt to the fact that they can't go to the movies anymore.
Tracy was giving us a little vocabulary lesson here. She's saying that there's linear and there's streaming. Broadcasting is linear and streaming is OTT. The thing that I'm aware of from my nephews and my young people that I know, viewing habits are different than they used to be when I was young. We used to make it a point to be at a certain time in a certain channel because that was the way networks worked. You were told when to see the show. Very few young people that I know want to be told when they should watch something. So it seems like streaming has become much more popular than broadcast TV. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, for the younger generation, sure, but even for my generation, you know, we record everything. We watch our show, we binge watch. I'll watch 2 or 3 or 4 episodes at a time of a show that I'm watching. You know, my wife and I are watching a show right now it ended 4 years ago, but got such good reviews. You know, we started watching it, now I'm on season 2. So I certainly missed the window. It's 4 years old already, right? But now here I am watching it, enjoying it very much. So yeah, I would agree with that.
The other thing that I'm wondering, do you think that Shutdown has affected any kind of impact on viewing habits? Since people got used to not going to theaters, not going to movie theaters or even Broadway, and we're having a hard time getting them back. Mm-hmm. Everybody's having a hard time except Hugh Jackman, of course. But there were like, now we have Jim on camera. Welcome, Jim. So
hello.
Now you can say hello to the viewers out there. There you are, finally in a place where we can see you. Great. It seems to me that a lot of things have changed. I don't know whether you would associate any of this with COVID or whether it's just something that's happened as a natural evolution of the business. But for instance, we're in a time period, the first time, starting about 3 or 4 years ago, where streaming services, streaming content was becoming competitive with movies. It never used to be. It never used to have a chance. Now we see streaming content is actually dominating. In some ways, it's dominating more than even the movie business, or not. I mean, I want your opinions on this.
I mean, I would say there's such a demand for content now, because of the streaming services, because of the Amazons and the Netflixes. I think you're correct, Bob. It's hard to get people back into the theater. I like going to the movies, but when I know it's also going to be on streaming in 2 weeks or a month, it makes you think about, do I need to spend $30 or $50 and all that,
or risk COVID. I've had COVID 3 times, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Or risk COVID. That's a good point. But I like the big screen experience. Yes, I have a big screen TV in my house. I still like getting out and going to the theater. Other people may have given it up a little more, and I hope they do come back.
Jim, what's your take on it all? I mean, we're in a huge cultural shift. I mean, you and I probably are more sensitive to it than younger people, but things are very different today than they were like 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think once things eased up a little bit, I definitely started going back to movie theaters again, even for movies that are going to be on Netflix in a week or two. And even though I have an 85-inch screen television in my living room, but there's something about something about going to the movies that, because that was a special thing for me when I was a kid. Going to the movies was something special. And because that's how I grew up, even though I can approximate it in other ways, it's still, maybe the kid in me still thinks it's something special.
Well, hopefully the culture is going to readjust to the live experience more than it has been already. I mean, there is a big movement lately. There's been a lot more success in films. Films have actually been making more money lately. I don't know if we're equaling the pre-COVID. I don't think we're equaling pre-COVID sales, but certainly we have some huge hits that are out there now. Owen, I'm going to ask you to find any questions that we've missed.
All right, I've got one from Judith here. This is a logistic question for Lewis. If you're working on a feature or a 2.5-hour streaming film with various locations, do you try to book the same location for as long as needed so you can schedule all of the scenes in that location at once? And if not, why not?
Yes, the answer is you do, as long as it's within the same episode or within the same 2 episodes with the same director. If it's a new director, you will go back to that location if you have to, if that location appears in a new script at a later time. But often we have one director shooting back-to-back episodes. You'll go to the restaurant and shoot all the restaurant scenes at once. And then you'll tell the actors will know ahead of time, okay, we're doing scene 13 from episode 3 and scene 24 from episode 4 together. And then they'll understand where they're, how their character has changed between the 2 episodes. And you do that for economic reasons. You don't want to buy out the restaurant twice. You want to have the same set, and you don't have to revisit and reset up your cameras and your lighting and everything. That's why that's why you do that.
Anything else, Owen?
Yes. Our next question is from Janet. You answer this in the chat, Lewis, but I guess we'll just get you could just recap your answer about have you ever written a book about or thought about writing a book about TV writing, or are there any TV writing books that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to write a TV writing book, I think you have to be published. I don't think anyone would take me seriously because I haven't been published as a writer yet, although I'm flattered by it. But I've thought about, I could certainly write about being an assistant director, the nuts and bolts of running a set, working with directors, even to some extent directing. I don't know. I think there are other people more qualified than me that are recognized as professional writers to write that kind of book.
Owen, how about Don Loftus's question?
Yep. There is a lot of conversation about playwrights turning to the movie industry, Disney, Hulu, HBO, etc., and abandoning theater. The movie industry is allegedly welcoming them as people with, quote, new views. Is this something the movie folks are conscious of, or is it just theater folk wishful thinking?
So how welcoming are you to us? There, I'm putting you on the spot, Lewis and Jim.
Look, if you've got a great idea and you have a contact with the showrunner, I don't think it matters if you come from the theater world or the TV world or no world at all. But you've got this amazing idea and it's original, or it's not original, but there's a good spin on it. I think it's possible. But I'm not aware of what you're talking about, going to Disney or Hulu or anything like that. But
And the key there is contacts. You have to have a contact.
yeah. Or you create them, or you have the money, if you've got money there and you want to make something small, you look at like Christopher Nolan made Memento, and you get it out there, hits the film festival circuit. Now people want access to you. Now they want to know what else you have that they can bankroll.
How about Catherine Sandberg, Owen?
Before that, we have one from Paul. And so when you are designing a production, are there ways to build in longevity for the future, secondary airings or streamings? And I personally would like to add to that, has anything changed in regards to syndication becoming less focused as the streaming landscape has evolved?
Wow. I get the show made. I don't even, I'm not involved that much in post-production. And I'm on to the next show. And I'm just thinking about getting the season shot. And then if there's, in a lucky world, there's another season 6 or 7 months down the road, it gets picked up again. And I think it's probably, there are people who definitely are thinking about longevity and its future life, but they're not me. They're people that are, sitting in the producing or in the network or the studio in Los Angeles, figuring out, if they put this much money into this show, how much money is it going to give back? And my job simply is to get the show made for the money that they give me.
We're going to just take like 1 or 2 more questions, Owen. I think Catherine Sandberg's is interesting.
Yeah, Catherine's is kind of off of that. With streaming, is it true that there's no way to quantify a hit? If so, what are the implications to that?
Is that true? First of all, let us know whether you feel that's true or whether you're not aware of it.
I don't think it's true. I think there are ways to quantify a hit, even with streaming.
I mean, the Nielsen's, the way that they used to judge the popularity of a show by, electronics and by little notebooks that people were supposed to keep to tell people what their viewing habits were. That's not necessarily those ways, but I mean, I think you can, if a show is just being talked about, White Lotus is a hit. We all know it's a hit. Everyone's talking about it. That's not scientific, but it is a way of telling that a show is a hit.
And downloads. People are downloading it. They can quantify it that way.
So how does the income come in for streaming shows? How do they make money?
They have a subscription. You pay every month to have that streaming service, unless you're pirating it. And
but I mean,
people do.
How about the White Lotus itself? How does the White Lotus quantify its earnings, its success? Does it pay back the money that it cost? I mean, I don't know. I know nothing about this, and I know nothing about the dollars and cents.
That's an HBO Max show, I think. So if you subscribe to HBO or you pay additional $4 or $5 a month to HBO Max, I'm sure they have a way to quantify whether that show is worth getting made by the number of hits, the number of people that are watching it each week, saying, all right, this is what our customers want to see. We're going to keep making White Lotus. These other streaming shows are not being watched, so we're going to cancel that show, or they're not being downloaded, or the number of times you're being watched in comparison to how much they cost to make either makes it worth it or not to continue.
And Owen himself is saying it's out of reach of the general consumer, but all of the streaming sites absolutely track their metrics.
And,
So-
and to add to that, I think that a lot of it is just because a lot of these streaming sites are losing money hand over fist. They're not profitable in the way that a traditional business would be. I mean, you see Netflix posting these losses every single year. So they want to keep those numbers to themselves, just so that they know. But if, you know, they're continually saying, oh, we're making X amount of money, then people can kind of ask, well, then why did you pay this much more amount of money to make this show?
Netflix is a really interesting example. They came along, I mean, they were a DVD rental company, and you got your DVDs by mail instead of going to Blockbuster. And that's how they started. And then they evolved into a company that produced its own material. And what they did, because they really didn't know what they were doing, was they started to spend incredible amounts of money to make these shows. And they would pay more than anybody else to acquire the script, to cast it, to shoot it. And they realized eventually that people were talking about them, but they weren't making any money because they were paying way too much. So fairly recently, they changed their strategy. And I was actually at the beginning of that when they suddenly decided that they were going to really keep the costs down. The problem is that everybody who was becoming involved was still thinking that they were dealing with the Netflix that was spending a fortune. And here I was trying to get the show made for less than it should have been made for. One of those unproducible scripts situations that Lewis was talking about. But in the case of that show, which was a show called First Kill, it had already started. They all went into it knowing that they could not make it for the money that they had agreed to make it for. It was one of the reasons why the original producer was fired. But they were making a big vampire special effects stunts movie with no money, or not movie, series with no money. And it was inevitable that it was going to go way over budget. And that was because Netflix had created this image of themselves as people who spent money to make great shows, and then suddenly changed in midstream and started trying to make great television with no money, which is a whole different style of working. And I don't think they've recovered from that yet.
Well, I think we have to end now. Because it's late. It's 6:43. I hope that we covered some things that were useful for the community, the people in the room. You guys will let us know if this is helpful at all. Basically, I wanted a bunch of theater folks to have a little bit of an insight into what the other businesses are like. I mean, one of the big differences between theater and film and television is that you can make money in film and television. So we'll start there, but I think that you also, shared a lot of very specific stuff about the business and about the industry and the vocabulary. That's the other thing I'm always concerned about is when you use words, do they mean the same thing as when we use words? So I hope we sort of disambiguated some of that. I want to thank you both, Lewis and Jim. It was very, very nice meeting you. And Daryl, why don't you come on and say hello as the guy that put us all together and introduced us. And just say a quick hi and tell us. There you are. Now you're in costume.
Now he's Daryl. Now without the hat, he's not Daryl.
Yeah.
Hi guys, I'm glad you guys were here, and You know, it was great listening to everything. I love both of you guys. We have history. Lewis and I are close friends. Jim and I are close friends. And Bob, thank you for having them. I hope that everybody got something out of this. And I think maybe we'll do something down the line again later on this year, Bob.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep bringing TV and film into the conversations so that the rest of us in theater are aware of the rest of the world. I think it's important, and also it's important for us to understand what the opportunities are. I won't tell you how old I am. I'm older than you, Jim, and I've spent years, decades, trying to convince myself to sit down and write a screenplay, and I just don't have the guts to do it. So God bless you in your industry, and hopefully some of us will straddle both worlds. I know that Tom Pullum, who's in the room with us right now, who used to be the chairman of my board, he's been in theater for years and years and years, and he transitioned during Shutdown to a company that does streaming, actually before Shutdown, streamingmusicals.com. And I know he works in both areas, and a lot of my friends, Michael Alden and other people, and Tracy Swedlow, who's in the room with us now. I know that she's very active in television, and she's sort of come over to us just to learn a little bit about theater. So I hope that the interaction between the media is useful and nurturing and helping to grow a lot of us into much more full-bodied artists, and I think it's just good for us to know about other opportunities and other areas to work in. I'm going to actually wind up now, and I'm going to go back into speaker view, and I'm going to say thank you to my community for being here today. Thank you again to Jim and Lewis and Daryl. And also to everybody in the room and everybody out there who's watching us now. If you want to be in the room and ask the questions, email me at trunltd@aol.com, and we'll invite you every week, and you can come hear interesting conversations. Next week, we've got a big player from the United Kingdom. Lewis Hartshorn is going to be here. He's has tons of producing credits in London, and he's also big on immersive theater, and he's bringing some immersive pieces here to New York, and he's also been transforming some spaces here, and he's got a lot to talk about. So guys, I hope you'll join us next week and meet Lewis, and we have other things coming up in the future. And this is the pitch part. We love having you here, and we understand that we've gone through a tough 2.5 years, and money is an issue for many of you, and we welcome you to pay what you can. And if what you can is nothing, you are still welcome to come and be with us. However, if you want to pay something, please consider donating to us. We just finished our year-end appeal, and we didn't make our goal on December 31st, but today we finally reached the $10,000 mark. We raised $10,000, and that's thanks to so many of you here in the room and some people out there as well. So go to truedonate.com if you want to support what we do. trudonate.com. That's trudonate.com. We'll put your money to good use, I promise. We got a lot of stuff coming up and a lot of programs that we're planning. And that's it. Hopefully I'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.